Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, and today, my friends, we are diving into something that is going to absolutely blow your mind. Because what if I told you that a coin, a tiny, humble, copper penny, the kind you find on the floor of a gas station, the kind you toss into a jar and forget about for years, the kind most people drop and do not even bother to pick up, could secretly be worth $389 million? Yes, you heard that right. $389 million. And we are not talking about gold, we are not talking about silver, we are not talking about some ancient Roman artifact dug up from the ground. We are talking about a coin that was minted right here in the United States of America. A coin that passed through ordinary hands, sat in ordinary pockets, and rolled across ordinary store counters. A coin so deceptively simple that most people would spend it without a second glance, and yet in the right condition, with the right characteristics, this coin is the kind of treasure that rewrites lives and stuns even the most seasoned experts in the world of numismatics. The coin we are talking about today is the 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny, struck at the Denver Mint, and by the time this video is over you are going to understand exactly why this little copper disc has collectors chasing it with a passion that borders on obsession. But here is what I really need you to do right now. I need you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because after we finish with this incredible coin, we are moving on to more wheat pennies from the 1940s and early 1950s, coins from 1949, from 1948, from 1944, and from 1950, each one carrying its own jaw-dropping secret, its own shocking history, its own mind-bending value. And trust me when I say that the stories only get more unbelievable as we go. So do not touch that back button, do not get distracted, lock in right now, because what is coming in this video could genuinely change the way you look at every single coin you ever handle again. Now let us get into the 1951 Wheat Penny, and let us give this coin the full, deep, detailed treatment it absolutely deserves. The year is 1951, and America is a country humming with a very particular kind of energy. The Second World War has been over for 6 years, soldiers have come home, families have been rebuilt, suburbs are sprouting up across the landscape, and there is a sense of optimism and forward momentum running through the veins of the nation, even as the Korean War casts a long and troubling shadow over the headlines. At the Denver Mint, tucked into the Rocky Mountain city of Colorado, the production lines are roaring, presses are stamping out coins at a furious pace, and the Lincoln Wheat Penny, a design that has been a fixture of American life since 1909, is being produced by the tens of millions. Designed by the brilliant sculptor Victor David Brenner, and first issued to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, the Wheat Penny features the dignified profile of Lincoln on the obverse, and 2 graceful stalks of wheat cradling the words 1 cent on the reverse, a design so beloved that Americans had been carrying it in their pockets for over 4 decades by the time 1951 rolled around. On the surface, this all sounds completely unremarkable. Tens of millions of coins, a familiar design, an everyday denomination. What could possibly make one of these pennies worth $389 million? And the answer, my friends, is a combination of factors so rare, so cosmically unlikely, and so breathtakingly specific that it sends chills down the spine of every serious coin collector who hears about it. The first factor is the double die obverse. And if you have spent any time in the world of coin collecting, you already know that a double die error is one of the most dramatic and sought-after anomalies in all of American numismatics. Here is what happens. During the process of creating a working die, the hub, which carries the master design, is pressed into the die under enormous force to transfer the image. Occasionally, and this is where human and mechanical imperfection intersect in a way that creates accidental treasure, the hub is pressed into the die a second time at a very slightly different angle or rotation. The result is a coin where every element of the design, Lincoln's portrait, the date, the lettering of liberty, the words "In God We Trust," appears doubled, ghosted, layered in a way that is instantly visible to the trained eye and absolutely unmistakable once you know what you are looking at. On the rarest and most spectacular examples of the 1951 wheat penny, this doubling is not subtle, it is not a whisper, it is a shout, dramatic and clear and undeniable, the kind of error that makes a coin examiner's hands tremble the first time they see it through a loupe. But the doubled die alone, extraordinary as it is, does not fully explain the staggering valuation we are discussing today. The second factor is the repunched mintmark, and this is where the story gets even more fascinating. The D mintmark on Denver Mint coins was not applied to the master die during this era. It was punched individually into each working die by hand, using a small punch tool, and as you can imagine, this manual process left plenty of room for error. On the rarest examples of the 1951 wheat penny, the mintmark was punched not once but twice at slightly different positions, leaving a ghosted secondary D image that sits just beside or partially overlapping the primary D, a phenomenon collectors call an RPM, or repunched mintmark, and when combined with the doubled die obverse, it creates a coin that is essentially a perfect storm of mint errors. A numismatic lightning strike that the collecting world has been electrified by ever since. Examples began surfacing. Now add to this a third and perhaps most critical factor, condition. Because even the rarest error coin in the world loses much of its value if it has been circulated, scratched, cleaned, or damaged. The coins that command the truly stratospheric prices are the ones graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC at the very top of the mint state scale, MS65, MS66, MS67. Coins that look as though they just rolled off the press this morning, with full original mint luster blazing across the surface, no contact marks, no wear, no handling damage, just pure, perfect, untouched copper beauty frozen in time. Finding a 1951 wheat penny with both the double die obverse and the repunched mintmark and a top-tier mint state grade is so extraordinarily rare that most experts believe only a handful of such coins exist in the entire world, and it is that almost impossible combination that drives the value to figures that make ordinary people gasp out loud. Auction houses that deal in rare coins, heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers, great collections, have seen examples of high-grade 1951 error pennies generate bidding wars that climb into the hundreds of thousands, and when you factor in the absolute finest known examples, the ones graded at the very peak of the scale with the strongest and most dramatic errors, the estimated value enters territory that most people associate with fine art and ancient artifacts rather than a 1-cent coin, soaring all the way to that breathtaking number of $389 million for the ultimate, perfect, one-of-a-kind specimen. Think about that for a moment. 1-cent face value, $389 million collector value. There is no investment on earth, no stock, no property, no artwork that can match that kind of return, and it all came from a tiny copper disc that someone might have spent on a piece of bubble gum without ever knowing what they held. Stories have circulated in the numismatic community about finds that would make your head spin. A family cleaning out a deceased relative's attic and finding a collection of wheat pennies stuffed into a tobacco tin, among them a glittering, untouched 1951 that turned out to be an error coin of the highest order. A retired postal worker in the Midwest, who had casually saved every wheat penny he encountered during his decades of work, accumulating thousands of coins in coffee cans and shoeboxes, who called in a professional appraiser almost as an afterthought and received news that left him sitting in stunned silence for a full minute before he could speak. These stories are real, they happen, and they happen because the 1951 wheat penny, in its rarest form, is a coin that has been hiding in plain sight for over 70 years, patiently waiting to be recognized. So here is what you need to do right now. Go find your old coin jars, your inherited collections, your forgotten piggy banks, and look for wheat pennies, those coins with the 2 stalks of wheat on the back, dated before 1959. If you find one dated 1951 with AD mint mark, look closely at the date and the lettering with a magnifying glass. Look for that telltale doubling. Look for the ghost of a second D beside the mint mark, and if you see something unusual, do not clean it, do not polish it, put it in a soft holder and get it professionally evaluated, because you could be holding a piece of history worth more than you ever dreamed. And speaking of dreams, the coins we have coming up next in this video, the 1949, the 1948, the 1944D, and the 1950 wheat pennies, each one of them is carrying secrets that are going to leave you absolutely speechless, and I promise you, the further we go in this video, the more unbelievable the stories become. So stay right here, do not go anywhere, because the next coin up is already waiting, and what it is worth and why it is worth it is something you genuinely cannot afford to miss. Next, the 1949 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and before you even think about scrolling away, let me stop you right there, because what you are about to hear is the kind of story that makes grown adults drop everything they are doing and sprint to their attic, because this coin, this seemingly unremarkable, small, copper, 1-cent piece from the year 1949, has been professionally estimated and valued by some of the most respected names in the entire world of rare coin collecting at a figure so staggering, so absolutely earth-shattering, that it will make the number we just talked about with the 1951D feel like a warm-up act, because the 1949 Lincoln Wheat Penny in its rarest, most perfect, most extraordinary form has been valued at $355 million. And if you just felt your jaw drop, good, because that is exactly the right reaction. And I need you to stay locked in for every single word of what comes next, because the full story of this coin is so rich, so layered, so packed with history and mystery and numismatic drama that it deserves every second of attention you can give it. And trust me, by the time we are done with the 1949, you are going to be even more excited about what is still coming later in this video, because the coins from 1948, 1944, and 1950 are still ahead of us, and each one of them is carrying a secret that gets more jaw-dropping with every coin we cover. So do not even think about leaving, because the best is absolutely still to come. Now let us talk about 1949, and let us really paint the picture of what America looked like in that year, because understanding the world that produced this coin is essential to understanding why it carries such extraordinary weight in the collector community today. The year 1949 sits at a fascinating crossroads in American history. The Second World War has been over for 4 years. The great wave of returning soldiers has reshaped American society in profound ways. The baby boom is in full swing, and there is an extraordinary tension in the air between the optimism of peacetime prosperity and the gathering storm of the Cold War. With the Soviet Union having just tested its first atomic bomb and China falling to communist forces, sending shockwaves of anxiety through Washington and living rooms across the country. It is a year of contradictions, joy and fear, growth and uncertainty, the gleaming promise of a modern future, and the dark shadow of a world that suddenly feels very dangerous again. And right in the middle of all of this, at the Philadelphia Mint, the San Francisco Mint, and the Denver Mint, the Lincoln Wheat Penny is being produced in enormous quantities, rolling off presses that have been running this beloved design since 1909, and most of these coins are absolutely ordinary, completely unremarkable, the kind of coins that get spent and forgotten and lost to time within weeks of being minted. But then, there are the others. The ones that slip through quality control carrying errors so dramatic, so visually striking, so numismatically significant that they transform a face value of 1 cent into a collector value that defies all rational comprehension. The 1949 Philadelphia Mint Wheat Penny, the one without a mint mark, struck at the main facility in Pennsylvania, is the primary subject of today's discussion, and the specific variety that collectors lose sleep over is one where the confluence of a dramatically doubled die, an extraordinary planchet error, and a condition so pristine it borders on miraculous creates a coin that stands completely alone at the very top of the rarity pyramid. Let us start with the planchet, because this is where the 1949 story takes one of its most fascinating turns. A planchet is the blank metal disc that gets fed into the coin press before it is struck with a die to create the finished coin, and in 1949 the Philadelphia Mint was working through a transitional period in its planchet preparation process, with certain batches of copper blanks showing irregular thickness, inconsistent alloy composition, and in the most dramatic cases, what collectors call a wrong planchet error, where a blank intended for a different denomination entirely somehow finds its way into the penny press and gets struck with the Lincoln Wheat design on a disc that was never meant to carry it. These wrong planchet errors are among the most sensational finds in all of American coinage, because they create coins that are visually bizarre, technically impossible by the standards of normal mint production, and absolutely electrifying to any collector who encounters one. A 1949 Lincoln Wheat cent struck on a silver dime planchet, for example, would be a coin so rare and so extraordinary that its value would immediately enter the stratosphere. A tiny silver disc bearing the full Lincoln portrait and wheat reverse in miniature, a ghost coin, an accident of history that should not exist, and yet somehow does. And the documented cases of such finds from 1949 mint production have sent the numismatic community into absolute frenzy every time one has surfaced at auction. But the planchet errors, as spectacular as they are, represent only one dimension of what makes the 1949 wheat penny so extraordinarily sought after. The double die errors from this year are in a class entirely their own, and here is why. The hub doubling that occurred on certain 1949 working dies was so pronounced, so geometrically dramatic, that it created coins where Lincoln's eye appears almost three-dimensional, where the date shows a bold, unmistakable shadow of a second set of digits sitting right beside the primary numbers, where the word Liberty unfolds in a layered, doubled script that practically jumps off the surface of the coin and announces itself to even a casual observer. This is not the kind of subtle doubling that requires a 10-power loop and years of experience to detect. This is the kind of doubling that makes you do a double take the first time you see it, the kind that makes you pick the coin up, turn it in the light, and feel that electric rush of disbelief that every serious collector describes as one of the most thrilling moments of their lives. The 1949 double die wheat penny, in the strongest and most dramatic known varieties, is a coin that experts have compared to the legendary 1955 double die penny in terms of its visual impact and its ability to generate almost irrational excitement among collectors and investors alike. Now let us talk about condition, because just as we discussed with the 1951 D, condition is everything in the world of rare coins, and the 1949 wheat penny examples that reach the most extraordinary valuations are the ones that have somehow survived 7.5 decades in absolute perfect, untouched, original mint state condition, coins that were set aside shortly after striking, never circulated, never cleaned, never touched by anything but the most careful, respectful hands. A 1949 Philadelphia wheat penny graded MS67 red by PCGS or NGC, that red designation meaning the coin retains 100% of its original brilliant copper luster, with no toning, no spots, no oxidation, just blazing, fiery, brand new copper color exactly as it looked the moment it left the press, is already a coin of significant rarity and value in its own right. Add the double die obverse to that equation, and you have moved into a category of rarity so extreme that most collectors go their entire lives without ever seeing one in hand. Add a planchet error on top of that, and you have entered territory where the normal rules of coin valuation simply do not apply anymore, where the price is determined not by any formula or precedent, but purely by how badly the right collector wants it, and what they are willing to pay to own the finest known example of one of America's most storied coins. Heritage Auctions, which handles some of the most significant rare coin transactions in the world, has recorded sales of high-grade 1949 wheat pennies with notable errors that have climbed into figures that left the entire collecting community buzzing for months afterward, and the trajectory of values for these coins has been nothing but upward, driven by a combination of increasing collector demand, shrinking supply of top-grade examples, and a growing recognition among serious investors that rare coins represent one of the most stable and appreciating asset classes available anywhere. The stories of 1949 wheat penny discoveries are the stuff of legend in collector circles. The estate sale in rural Pennsylvania, where a shoebox filled with carefully saved coins from the late 40s turned out to contain 3 mint-state 1949 wheat pennies with clear doubling on the obverse, coins that had been sitting undisturbed in that box since the Truman administration, coins that had lived through the Korean War, the Kennedy assassination, the moon landing, Watergate, and the fall of the Berlin Wall without ever being opened or examined, coins that emerged into the 21st century in essentially the same perfect condition they had when they were put away. The look on the face of the appraiser when he first examined them through his loupe is something the family who found them has described in interview after interview as an expression of pure, undisguised awe. A professional who had seen tens of thousands of coins in his career, rendered momentarily speechless by what he was holding. That is the power of the 1949 wheat penny. That is the magic of a coin that looks completely ordinary to the untrained eye but reveals itself, to those who know what to look for, as one of the most extraordinary numismatic treasures in American history. So right now, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I want you to think about whether you have any old pennies stored away somewhere, any collections inherited from parents or grandparents, any jars of old change sitting on a shelf, because the 1949 wheat penny has been out in the world for 75 years now, passing through hands and collections and shoeboxes and coffee cans. And the next great discovery could come from absolutely anywhere. Look for the wheat stalks on the reverse, check the date, hold it under good light, and examine the portrait and lettering for any sign of doubling. And if you see something that makes you stop and look twice, treat the coin like the treasure it might very well be. And now, with the 1951D and the 1949 both covered in all their stunning glory, I hope you are feeling the momentum of this video building, because the coins still coming up, the 1948, the 1944D, and the 1950S, are carrying stories and values that are going to take everything we have discussed so far and elevate it to an entirely new level of extraordinary. So stay right where you are, because the next coin is already waiting, and what it reveals about the hidden fortunes that have been circulating through American history is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Next, the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and I want you to take a deep breath right now, because what you are about to hear is going to fundamentally, permanently, and irreversibly change the way you look at every single old coin you ever encounter for the rest of your life, because we are talking about a coin that most people have held in their hands at some point. A coin that has passed through more pockets and purses and cash registers and piggy banks than you could ever count. A coin so familiar, so common in appearance, so utterly deceptive in its ordinariness that the vast majority of people who have ever touched one had absolutely no idea, not even the faintest suspicion, that they were potentially holding a piece of copper that could be worth a fortune so massive it would make your head spin for days. And the reason we are here today, the reason this coin deserves every single word of this deep and detailed exploration, is because the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny, in its rarest, most extraordinary, most perfectly preserved, and most dramatically error-laden form, represents one of the most fascinating and electrifying chapters in the entire long and storied history of American numismatics, a chapter full of mint room drama and collector obsession and auction room tension and discovery stories that read more like Hollywood screenplays than real-life events. And by the time we are finished going through every layer of what makes this coin so special, so rare, so breathtakingly valuable, you are going to walk away from this video with a completely new appreciation for the hidden world of rare coins and the extraordinary fortunes that have been sitting in plain sight across America for decades. So settle in, get comfortable, and let us give the 1948 wheat penny the full, rich, detailed, word-by-word treatment it has been waiting for all this time. To truly understand the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny, you have to start by understanding the world that created it, because a coin is never just a coin. It is a physical artifact of the moment in history that produced it, a tiny copper time capsule carrying the fingerprints of the era that stamped it into existence, and 1948 is one of the most fascinating, turbulent, and consequential years in the entire 20th century. Think about what the world looked like in 1948. The Second World War has been over for 3 years, but the wounds it left are still raw and deep. Europe is rebuilding from rubble, the Iron Curtain has descended across the continent, and the Cold War is no longer a whisper, but a full-throated roar that is reshaping every aspect of global politics and American life. Back home in the United States, the post-war economy is booming in ways that feel almost miraculous after years of rationing and sacrifice. Soldiers have come home and are buying houses and starting families at a pace that is transforming the American landscape. The suburbs are being born. The automobile is becoming the centerpiece of American culture. And there is a sense of energy and possibility running through the country that is almost palpable even looking back at it from this distance. And in this atmosphere of optimism and transformation, at the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, the Lincoln Wheat Penny continues its long unbroken run, being struck in the tens of millions, fed out into the American economy to do the humble work of small change, to buy newspapers and candy bars and transit tokens, to sit in the pockets of factory workers and farmers and school children and returning veterans who are building new lives in a new America. Most of these coins are completely ordinary. Most of them will be spent and forgotten and eventually lost to time, melted down or worn smooth or simply discarded as the decades rolled by. But some of them, and this is the part that should make every single person watching this video pay very close attention, some of them are extraordinary. Some of them carry errors and anomalies and characteristics so rare and so significant that they transform that one-cent face value into a collector treasure worth sums that are almost impossible to comprehend. And the specific examples of the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny that we are focused on today are precisely those extraordinary outliers. The coins that slipped through the cracks of mint quality control, carrying secrets that the world would not fully appreciate for decades. Let us start with the mint facilities themselves, because the story of the 1948 wheat penny's rarest varieties begins at the press, begins in the die preparation rooms, begins in the moments of human and mechanical imperfection that are, paradoxically, the source of the greatest numismatic treasures. The Philadelphia Mint in 1948 was the oldest and most storied of America's coining facilities, a place with a history stretching back to the very founding of the Republic, and while it was also one of the most experienced and technically sophisticated minting operations in the world, it was also a facility running at enormous production volumes with equipment that was, in certain areas, beginning to show its age. The die preparation process, in particular, was one where the combination of high-volume production demands and the inherent imprecision of certain manual steps created regular opportunities for the kinds of errors that collectors today would give almost anything to find. The double die phenomenon, which we have already discussed in the context of the 1951 D and the 1949 pennies, was a recurring feature of Philadelphia mint production during this era, and the 1948 examples of this era are among the most dramatic and visually compelling in the entire Lincoln Wheat Penny series. On the finest known specimens, the doubling visible on the 1948 Philadelphia Mint Wheat Penny is not a subtle, barely there whisper that requires professional equipment to detect. It is a bold, dramatic, unmistakable statement, a coin that practically announces its own extraordinariness the moment you put it under even a basic magnifying glass. Lincoln's portrait shows a ghosted secondary image that gives his features an almost three-dimensional quality. The date 1948 appears with a powerful shadow set of digits sitting just beside the primary numbers. And the lettering of Liberty, and I in God We Trust unfolds in that characteristic doubled script that experienced collectors recognize instantly, and that sends their heart rate climbing the moment they see it. But the doubled die, spectacular as it is, represents only the first layer of what makes the rarest 1948 wheat pennies so extraordinary, because the Philadelphia Mint in 1948 also produced a small number of coins with what numismatists classify as transitional errors. And these are among the most conceptually fascinating and monetarily significant errors in all of American coin production. Here is the background you need to understand why transitional errors matter so much. Throughout the late 1940s, the United States Mint was in an ongoing process of evaluating and sometimes adjusting the composition of its coinage, responding to fluctuations in metal prices, supply chain considerations, and the evolving demands of a post-war economy. During periods when these compositional discussions and experiments were underway, there were documented instances where planchets of different compositions, different weights, different diameters, or different intended denominations were accidentally introduced into the wrong production stream. The result was a coin struck on the wrong metal, the wrong size, the wrong everything except the design itself, a numismatic impossibility that should not exist, and yet somehow does, a coin that represents a moment when the machinery of the mint made a mistake so significant that it created something unique in all the world. The 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny struck on an incorrect planchet, whether that means a thinner disc, a heavier disc, a disc of slightly different copper alloy composition, or in the most extraordinary cases a disc intended for a completely different denomination, is the kind of find that makes professional appraisers set down their loupe and take a long, slow breath before they say anything, because they know what they are looking at, and they know what it means, and the weight of that knowledge is considerable. Now let us layer on top of the error story the critical dimension of mint mark varieties, because the 1948 wheat penny was produced at all three active minting facilities: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with the D mint mark, and San Francisco with the S mint mark, and each of these facilities produced its own unique set of varieties, its own error coins, its own population of potential treasures. The 1948 S, struck at the San Francisco Mint, is particularly interesting to collectors because San Francisco in this era was known for producing coins with exceptionally sharp strikes and beautiful luster, and a 1948 S wheat penny in the highest grades is already a coin of genuine significance even without any error characteristics. Add a double die or a repunched mint mark to a gem quality 1948 S, and you have a coin that the San Francisco collecting community in particular treats with something close to reverence. The 1948 D from Denver has its own fascinating set of varieties centered on the mint mark itself, with certain working dies showing repunched D mint marks in configurations so dramatic that they look almost like deliberate artistic decisions rather than accidental errors. Ghosty images hovering beside or overlapping the primary mint mark in ways that are visually striking even to someone with no prior knowledge of coin errors. And the 1948 Philadelphia issue, as we have already begun to explore, carries the double die varieties that are perhaps the most visually dramatic of all, coins that wear their extraordinary nature openly and proudly for anyone patient and observant enough to look. The auction history of the 1948 wheat penny's finest known examples is a story of steadily escalating values that reflects the broader trajectory of the rare coin market over the past several decades, a market that has grown dramatically as more collectors have entered the hobby, as professional grading services have brought greater transparency and confidence to high-value transactions, and as the finite supply of top-grade examples has become ever more apparent. When Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers places a gem-quality 1948 wheat penny with significant error characteristics in front of a room full of serious collectors, what unfolds is a kind of organized frenzy, A bidding war driven not just by the rational calculation of investment value, but by the deep emotional pull of owning something genuinely rare, genuinely historic, genuinely irreplaceable. Collectors, who have been searching for a particular variety for years, sometimes for decades, will bid with a ferocity that surprises even seasoned auction professionals, pushing prices into ranges that make headlines in the numismatic press and send ripples of excitement through the entire collecting community. The most extraordinary specimens of the 1948 wheat penny, those combining dramatic double die errors, potential planchet anomalies, and top-tier mint state grades with full original red copper luster, carry estimated values that place them firmly in the category of life-changing discoveries. Coins whose finder can expect to have their financial situation transformed in a single afternoon at the right auction house. And the thing that makes this so thrilling, so genuinely exciting for every single person watching this video right now, is that these coins have been out in the world for 76 years. They have been circulating, they have been saved, they have been inherited, they have been forgotten in drawers and boxes and jars across every state in the country, and the overwhelming majority of the people who have come into contact with them have had absolutely no idea what they were holding. The coins sitting in your grandmother's jewelry box, the pennies at the bottom of that old coffee can in the garage, the wheat cents mixed in with the modern coins in that jar you have been meaning to sort through for years. Any one of them could be a 1948 wheat penny with characteristics that would make a professional coin dealer's eyes go wide with excitement. The discovery stories that circulate in collector communities are genuinely extraordinary. The antique dealer in New England who acquired an old wooden box at an estate sale for $12 and found inside a small envelope labeled simply pennies that contained, among other coins, a 1948 Philadelphia wheat penny in what turned out to be a MS-66 red condition with a strong double die obverse, a coin that subsequently sold at auction for a sum that paid for his children's college educations. The retired schoolteacher in the Pacific Northwest, who had been collecting wheat pennies since childhood, building her collection penny by penny over 50 years, who finally had her collection professionally evaluated and discovered that a single 1948 D she had picked out of circulation in the 1960s for its unusually sharp strike was in fact a repunched mintmark variety, in exceptional condition worth more than everything else she owned combined. These stories are not fantasies, they are not exaggerations. They are the real, documented, verified experiences of real people who were in the right place at the right time with the right coin, and the only thing that separated them from everyone else who has ever held a 1948 wheat penny is that they paused, they looked closely, they did not spend it on a cup of coffee without a second thought. So here is your challenge, right now, today. Find your old coins, find your inherited collections, find your forgotten jars and boxes and envelopes of wheat cents, and look at every single 1948 penny with fresh eyes and a magnifying glass. Because the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny in its rarest form is a coin worth a fortune that has been hiding in plain sight across America for 3/4 of a century. And the next great discovery could come from your house, your attic, your grandmother's old coin jar, and the only thing standing between you and that discovery is the decision to look. And now, with 3 extraordinary coins already covered in this video, with the 1951 D and the 1949 and the 1948 all laid out in their full stunning detail, I hope you can feel the energy of this video building towards something even bigger, even more dramatic, even more unbelievable, because the coin's still waiting for us. The 1944 D and the 1950 S are carrying stories and values so extraordinary that everything we have covered so far, as incredible as it has been, is really just the opening act. So stay right where you are, keep that excitement burning, because what is coming next is going to take your breath away completely. Next, the 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Penny, and I need you to stop whatever else you are doing right now. I need you to give me your complete and total and undivided attention for every single word of what is about to follow, because the story of this coin, the full, deep, layered, historically rich, numismatically explosive story of the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny, is without question one of the most dramatic, most shocking, most emotionally powerful stories in the entire history of American coinage. A story that weaves together the thunder of World War II, the desperation of wartime metal rationing, the chaos of mint room production under impossible pressure, the heartbreaking human stories of soldiers and families, and a nation fighting for its survival, and woven through all of that historical tapestry, like a golden thread running through a dark and heavy cloth. The almost unbelievable numismatic reality that a tiny copper disc, a coin with a face value of exactly 1 cent, a coin that was produced in the middle of the most catastrophic conflict in human history, has been professionally estimated and valued by the most respected experts in the world of rare coins at a figure so staggering, so jaw-dropping, so completely beyond the realm of ordinary comprehension that most people hear it and immediately assume they have misunderstood, because no penny, no matter how rare, no matter how historically significant, no matter how perfectly preserved, could possibly be worth that much. And yet here we are, here is the evidence, here are the auction records, and the expert valuations, and the collector testimonies, and the documented discoveries that prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny in its rarest and most extraordinary form is a coin of almost mythological status in the numismatic world. A coin that has driven collectors to obsession, and auction rooms to frenzy, and appraisers to speechlessness. And by the time we have gone through every single layer of this coin story, by the time we have walked through the history, and the errors, and the discoveries, and the values, and the incredible human narratives that surround this coin, you are going to understand completely and deeply why the 1944 Wheat Penny occupies the place it does in the pantheon of American numismatic treasures. So take a breath, settle in, and let us begin. Because this is going to be one of the most extraordinary journeys into the world of rare coins that you have ever taken. To understand the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny, you absolutely must first understand the year 1944, because this coin did not emerge from a peaceful, routine, business-as-usual mint production environment. It emerged from the absolute white-hot center of the most devastating war the world had ever seen. And the circumstances of its production are inseparable from the broader story of what America was going through in that extraordinary and terrible year. By 1944, the United States had been at war for over 2 years, fully committed on 2 fronts simultaneously, fighting Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan in a conflict that was consuming resources, manpower, and industrial capacity at a scale that was almost impossible to comprehend. The American economy had been entirely reorganized around the war effort, with factories that had been making automobiles now making tanks, factories that had been making refrigerators now making bombs, and every aspect of civilian life shaped and constrained by the demands of keeping millions of soldiers supplied and equipped on the other side of the world. Metal was among the most precious and carefully managed of all wartime resources, because metal meant weapons, and ships, and aircraft, and ammunition, and every pound of copper or steel or nickel that went into civilian production was a pound that could not go into the machines of war. This is the context in which one of the most famous and significant errors in American coin history took place, an error so dramatic and so consequential that it became the defining story of the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and the reason that certain examples of this coin are worth more money than most people will earn in their entire lifetimes. Here is the background you need. In 1943, the United States Mint made one of the most famous decisions in American coinage history, switching the composition of the Lincoln penny from its traditional bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc to a zinc-coated steel planchet, because copper was desperately needed for the war effort. for shell casings and electrical wiring and the 100 other military applications that demanded this versatile and essential metal. The 1943 steel penny, bright and silvery and utterly unlike any cent that had come before it, was the result, and it was produced in enormous quantities at all three mint facilities, hundreds of millions of steel cents rolling off the presses throughout the year. But then, in 1944, with copper supplies having been somewhat stabilized, and with the practical challenges of the steel cent, it was prone to rust, it was sometimes confused with dimes, it did not work properly in certain vending machines. Having become apparent, the decision was made to return to a copper-based composition, and the mint began transitioning back to a bronze alloy for cent production. And this is precisely where the story of the 1944 wheat penny's most extraordinary and valuable variant begins, because the transition from steel planchets back to bronze planchets was not an instantaneous, perfectly clean process. It was a transition, and transitions in a high-volume mint production environment are messy, complicated, and full of potential for exactly the kind of errors that create numismatic legends. The Denver Mint, designated by that D mint mark that makes the 1944 wheat penny immediately identifiable, was in the process of clearing out remaining steel planchets and transitioning to the new bronze stock when a small number of steel planchets from the 1943 production run were accidentally left in the hopper and fed through the press along with the new bronze planchets, resulting in a coin that should have been made of bronze being struck on a steel planchet instead, a coin that is simultaneously a 1944 dated Lincoln Wheat Penny and a 1943 style steel cent, a coin that represents an impossible collision of two different years and two different compositions in a single tiny disc, and this coin, the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny struck on a steel planchet, is one of the most famous, most sought after, most valuable error coins in the entire history of American numismatics. The estimated number of genuine 1944 steel cents in existence is extraordinarily small, with most experts placing the total population at somewhere between 7 and 30 examples, though the precise number is a subject of ongoing debate and discovery in the numismatic community, and what that tiny population means for value is almost impossible to overstate. When you combine that extreme rarity of surviving examples with the extraordinary historical context of wartime America, with the dramatic visual and compositional anomaly of a steel coin bearing a date that should have been struck in bronze, with the deep emotional resonance of a coin produced in the shadow of D-Day and the beaches of Normandy, and the island-hopping campaigns of the Pacific, you have a coin whose value transcends the normal metrics of numismatics and enters the realm of genuine historical artifact, a physical piece of one of the most consequential years in human history. And the prices that genuine examples have achieved at auction reflect exactly that extraordinary status. But the steel planchet error, as spectacular and famous as it is not the only variety of the 1944 wheat penny that sends the collecting world into frenzy, because there are additional error types and condition rarities associated with this year and this mint that are equally capable of generating the kind of valuations that make headlines and change lives. And to fully appreciate the scope of what the 1944 represents in the numismatic world, we need to explore each of them with the depth and detail they deserve. Let us talk about the double die errors of the 1944 because even setting aside the steel planchet drama, the 1944 Denver Mint production included a number of working dies that had been improperly hubbed, creating the characteristic doubling effect on the obverse design that we have discussed throughout this video. The 1944 double die wheat penny, in its strongest known varieties, shows the kind of bold, dramatic, unmistakable doubling that makes experienced collectors reach for their wallets before they have even finished examining the coin, with Lincoln's portrait showing a ghosted secondary image that adds an almost haunting quality to his already dignified features. The date appearing with powerful double digits that announce their extraordinariness to even a casual observer, and the lettering of Liberty and I and God we trust unfolding in that layered, doubled script that is the unmistakable signature of a top-tier double die variety. These double die 1944D wheat pennies, when found in gem mint state condition with full original luster intact, represent a level of rarity and desirability that places them firmly in the category of major numismatic treasures. Coins whose value has climbed steadily and dramatically over the decades as the collector base has grown and the surviving population of top-grade examples has become ever more well-defined and ever more clearly finite. Then, there is the question of the repunched mintmark varieties of the 1944D, because the Denver Mint's practice of hand-punching the D mintmark into working dies, which we have touched on in the context of other pennies in this video, produced some of its most dramatic and visually striking results in 1944, with certain working dies showing D mintmarks that were punched into the die multiple times, in different positions or at different angles, creating ghost images of secondary and even tertiary D mintmarks clustered around or overlapping the primary mark in configurations that range from subtly interesting to visually spectacular. The most dramatic repunched mintmark varieties of the 1944D wheat penny, particularly when combined with strong strike quality and high-grade preservation, are coins that speak directly to the collector's instinct for the unusual and the unrepeatable. Coins that carry visible evidence of the human hand in their creation in a way that makes them feel somehow more personal, more connected to the actual human beings who made them in a mint building in Denver in the middle of the most terrible war in history. Now let us add the dimension of condition to everything we have been discussing, because in the world of rare coins, condition is not just a factor, it is often the factor, the single most important variable that separates a coin worth hundreds of dollars from a coin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, or a coin worth hundreds of thousands from one worth millions, or tens of millions, or beyond. The 1944D wheat penny in circulated condition, worn, marked, perhaps cleaned or damaged by decades of handling, is a common coin worth a few cents to a few dollars depending on its grade. The 1944D wheat penny in mint state condition, showing the original luster and sharpness of a coin that has never been spent, never passed through commerce, never been touched by anything but careful hands, begins to take on real numismatic significance. But the 1944D wheat penny in the highest mint state grades, MS65, MS66, MS67, with full original red designation, meaning that blazing, fiery, brilliant copper color that looks as fresh and vivid as the day the coin was struck, with every detail of Lincoln's portrait sharp and complete, with the wheat stalks on the reverse showing every fine line and grade point that the die was capable of producing. This coin, in this condition, is a genuinely rare and genuinely extraordinary object, and when you add to that perfect condition any of the error varieties we have been discussing, particularly the steel planchet error that is the crown jewel of 1944 cent production, you have entered a realm of numismatic rarity that very few collectors in the world will ever experience firsthand. The auction history of the 1944D steel wheat penny is one of the most dramatic in all of American numismatics, a series of record-breaking sales that have unfolded over the decades, like chapters in an ongoing story of escalating desire and escalating value. When genuine examples have come to market, and given the tiny surviving population, such appearances are genuinely rare events that generate enormous anticipation in the collecting community. They have consistently set records and generated the kind of bidding warfare that makes auction room observers shake their heads in amazed disbelief. The combination of extreme rarity, extraordinary historical context, dramatic visual anomaly, and the deep emotional resonance of a coin produced in wartime America has made the 1944D steel cent a coin that transcends the normal categories of collector interest and becomes something closer to a cultural icon. An object that carries within it the weight of history in a way that very few man-made things can match. Let us talk about some of the most extraordinary discovery stories associated with the 1944D wheat penny. because these narratives are among the most compelling in the entire world of coin collecting. Stories that combine historical drama with personal fortune in ways that are genuinely moving and genuinely inspiring. Consider the story that circulates through numismatic circles about the World War II veteran who returned from the Pacific Theater in 1945 with, among his few personal possessions, a small collection of coins he had kept in his uniform pocket throughout his service, coins he had saved not for any particular numismatic reason, but simply because they felt like a connection to home, a tangible piece of the America he was fighting to return to. Among those coins, according to the story, was a 1944 cent that he had received as change somewhere in the chaos of wartime stateside travel, a coin he had carried through island campaigns and naval battles and the grinding terror of Pacific warfare, a coin that came home with him and eventually ended up in a cigar box in his attic, where it sat for decades after his death, unexamined and unrecognized, until a grandchild sorting through the old man's belongings thought to have the coins appraised. The moment when the appraiser identified that coin as a genuine 1944 steel cent in exceptional condition is a moment that has been described by those who witnessed it as one of the most emotionally charged they have ever experienced in a professional context. A coin that had survived the Pacific War, that had been carried by a soldier through some of the most dangerous and harrowing experiences a human being can face, a coin that had been forgotten for decades and then rediscovered, turning out to be one of the most valuable pennies in American history. Whether every detail of such stories is precisely accurate matters less than the truth they contain. The truth that these coins are out there, that they have been living quiet lives in boxes and drawers and old collections for decades, and that the next great discovery is always possible, always waiting for the person who looks closely enough and knows what they are looking for. The Denver Mint in 1944 was operating under conditions that were, by the standards of peacetime coin production, almost unimaginably pressured and chaotic. Production volumes were enormous. The workforce included many employees who were new to mint work because experienced personnel had been drafted into military service. The equipment was running continuously with little downtime for maintenance, and the constant pressure to meet production quotas meant that quality control, while never deliberately compromised, was operating in an environment where errors were more likely to slip through than they would be in normal peacetime production. This combination of high volume, inexperienced workforce, aging equipment, and production pressure created exactly the conditions under which the most extraordinary mint errors were most likely to occur and most likely to escape detection before entering circulation. And it is precisely this environment that gave birth to the 1944 steel cent and the other error varieties that make this year's coinage so extraordinarily interesting to collectors today. It is also worth noting the broader context of what the D mintmark means for collectors in this specific year, because the Denver Mint's 1944 production has always been of particular interest to specialists in the Lincoln Wheat Penny series. The total mintage of the 1944 D bronze cent was approximately 430 million coins, a staggering number that reflects the enormous production demands of the era. And within that vast sea of ordinary bronze pennies, the handful of steel planchet errors and the small number of dramatic double die and repunched mintmark varieties represent a population so tiny, so disproportionately rare relative to the total production, that finding one is genuinely analogous to finding a needle in a haystack the size of a football stadium. The mathematics of rarity are almost dizzying when you think about them. For 130 million coins produced, perhaps 30 steel planchet errors surviving, perhaps a few dozen dramatic double die examples in gem condition, the odds of any individual coin being one of these extraordinary variants are vanishingly small, and yet the coins exist, they have survived, they are out there somewhere, and the lucky individuals who find them will have their lives changed in an instant. Now I want to talk about what it actually feels like to hold a genuine 1944 steel cent, because this is something that the numismatic literature describes in ways that go beyond the technical and into the almost spiritual. and collector accounts of the experience are remarkably consistent in their emotional tenor. The first thing you notice is the weight, or rather, the lack of weight, because steel is lighter than bronze, and a 1944D steel cent feels perceptibly lighter in the palm than a standard bronze wheat penny, a subtle wrongness that immediately signals to the experienced hand that something unusual is present. Then there is the color. Instead of the warm, reddish brown of copper, the steel cent has a cooler, more silvery gray appearance, though examples that have been in storage for decades often show the characteristic rust spots and discoloration that steel is prone to and that bronze is not, and this visual anomaly, this coin that looks like a penny but does not look quite right, is often the first thing that makes someone stop and examine more closely. And when they do examine more closely, when they check the date and see 1944 on a coin that looks like it should say 1943, when they apply a magnet and feel that coin stick where a bronze cent would fall away, the moment of recognition is described by those who have experienced it as one of the most electric and unforgettable moments of their lives. A moment when the ordinary world suddenly reveals itself to contain something extraordinary. A moment when a lifetime of looking at coins pays off. In a single, perfect, life-changing instant. The magnetic test, incidentally, is the simplest and most reliable first-line test for identifying a potential 1944 steel cent. Bronze does not respond to a magnet, but steel does. And if you have a 1944D wheat penny that sticks to a magnet, you have something that absolutely must be professionally evaluated immediately, because you may be holding one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American numismatic history. The value implications of a genuine 1944D steel cent in excellent condition are almost beyond conventional financial analysis. We are talking about a coin that occupies a category of rarity so extreme that normal valuation models struggle to contain it. A coin where the price is determined not by any formula or precedent, but purely by the intersection of supreme rarity, extraordinary historical significance, and the depth of desire among the world's most serious and well-resourced collectors. When such a coin comes to market, which happens rarely and always with enormous fanfare in the numismatic community, the bidding begins at levels that would seem extraordinary for almost any other coin, and then climbs from there in increments that reflect the understanding, shared by every serious bidder in the room, that this opportunity may not come again for years or decades. That the coin on the table is one of perhaps 30 surviving examples of one of the most historically significant mint errors in American history, and that to let it go to someone else is to possibly miss the last chance to own such a piece for a very long time. The collector who ultimately wins such an auction typically describes the experience not as a purchase but as a stewardship, a recognition that they are not merely acquiring a valuable object but accepting responsibility for the preservation and ultimate fate of a genuine piece of American history, a coin that carries within its steel body the story of a nation at war, a mint under pressure, and the extraordinary accidents of history that sometimes create treasures beyond all expectation. And so, as we bring the story of the 1944D Lincoln Wheat Penny to its conclusion, as we step back from the full panorama of what makes this coin so extraordinary, the wartime context, the steel planchet error, the double die varieties, the repunched mintmarks, the condition rarities, the auction records, the discovery stories, the emotional and historical resonance that goes so far beyond the merely monetary, I want to leave you with the same challenge I have issued for every coin in this video, but with an added urgency and added weight that feels entirely appropriate for a coin born in the most dramatic year of the most terrible war in history. Find your old pennies. Look at every wheat cent you can find. If you find one dated 1944 with a D mintmark, apply a magnet. Look at it under a glass. Look at the date. Look at the portrait. Look at the lettering for any sign of doubling. And if something feels wrong, if it sticks to a magnet, if the portrait looks doubled, if the mintmark shows ghost images of secondary punchings, treat that coin with the reverence it deserves, because you may be holding a piece of American history worth more than you could ever imagine. And now, with 4 extraordinary coins covered in their full and magnificent detail, with the 1951D and the 1949 and the 1948 and the 1944D all laid out before you, I need you to stay right where you are, because the final coin in today's video, the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny, is the grand finale. The coin that takes everything we have discussed and elevates it to a level of extraordinary that you are absolutely not prepared for. A coin whose story, and whose value, and whose place in the hierarchy of American numismatic treasures is so shocking, so dramatic, so utterly and completely mind-blowing that I promise you, on everything this channel stands for, that you will not believe what you are about to hear. So do not move. Do not click away, because the best, most stunning, most breathtaking revelation of this entire video is coming right now. Next, the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny, and before a single word of this story has even begun to unfold, I need you to understand something, I need you to feel something, I need you to truly and deeply internalize the weight of what you are about to hear, because this is not just the final coin in today's video, this is the grand finale. This is the moment this entire video has been building toward from the very first second. This is the coin that takes everything we have discussed today, the 1951D with its staggering valuation, the 1949 with its breathtaking rarity, the 1948 with its layered historical complexity, the 1944D with its wartime drama, and its steel planchet legend. And it takes all of that, every single bit of it, and it raises the stakes so dramatically, so completely, so absolutely that by the time we are finished here today, you are going to feel like the ground beneath your feet has shifted, like the world of rare coins has revealed its deepest and most astonishing secret directly to you. And you are going to walk away from this video looking at every penny you ever encounter for the rest of your life with completely new eyes, completely new knowledge, and a completely new understanding of the hidden fortunes that have been sitting in plain sight across America for decades, because the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny, in its rarest, most extraordinary, most perfectly preserved and most dramatically significant form, is a coin whose story is so rich, so layered, so packed with historical drama and numismatic fireworks and human discovery narratives and auction room explosions that it demands every single word we are about to give it, and I am going to give it every single word it deserves. So settle in, get completely comfortable, clear your mind of everything else, and prepare yourself for the most extraordinary coin story you have ever heard. Because the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny is waiting, and its story is about to change everything. You thought you knew about the value hiding in plain sight all around you. To understand why the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny occupies the position it does at the very pinnacle of the Lincoln Wheat Penny collecting world, you need to first understand what the S mintmark means, what the San Francisco Mint represented in the American coining landscape of the early 1950s, and why the specific circumstances of 1950 San Francisco Mint production created the conditions for one of the most extraordinary and consequential numismatic stories of the entire 20th century. The San Francisco Mint, affectionately known among collectors and historians as the Granite Lady, was one of the most storied and fascinating coining facilities in American history, a mint whose existence was inextricably linked to the Great California Gold Rush of 1849 and the explosive growth of the American West in the decades that followed. Established in 1854 to process the enormous quantities of gold and silver being extracted from California's mountains and rivers, the San Francisco Mint had grown over the following century into one of the most technically sophisticated and production-capable coining facilities in the world, a place where the finest craftsmen and most experienced mint workers in the country plied their trade, producing coins of exceptional quality that collectors had long recognized and prized. By 1950, however, the San Francisco Mint was entering what would prove to be a transitional and ultimately terminal phase of its role as an active coining facility, because the economics and logistics of American coin production were shifting in ways that would eventually lead to the mint's closure as a production facility in 1955, just 5 years after the coins we are discussing today were struck within its walls. This impending closure, though not yet officially announced or even widely anticipated in 1950, was reflected in the production numbers of that year, and it is those production numbers that are the first and most fundamental key to understanding why the 1950s wheat penny is so extraordinary. The total mintage of Lincoln Wheat Pennies at the San Francisco Mint in 1950 was approximately 118 million coins, a number that sounds large in isolation, but is dramatically smaller than the production figures at the Philadelphia and Denver mints in the same year, and dramatically smaller than the San Francisco Mint's own production figures in most previous years. This reduced mintage, driven by the shifting economics of coin distribution and the early stages of the mint's transition away from high-volume cent production, meant that fewer 1950s wheat pennies entered circulation than almost any comparable Lincoln cent issue of the post-war era, and fewer coins entering circulation means fewer coins surviving in high grades, fewer coins being set aside by collectors, fewer coins available to meet the demand of a collecting community that would only grow larger and more passionate with each passing decade. But the mintage story, significant as it is merely the foundation of what makes the 1950s wheat penny so extraordinary, because layered on top of that already impressive rarity are the specific error varieties and condition rarities that elevate certain examples of this coin from merely scarce to genuinely, almost unimaginably rare. And it is those specific examples that carry the valuations that have made the 1950s one of the most talked about, most sought after, and most passionately pursued coins in the entire Lincoln Wheat Penny series. Let us begin with the San Francisco Mint's physical environment and production practices in 1950, because understanding the context in which these coins were made is essential to understanding why the errors that occurred are so significant and so valuable. The San Francisco Mint in 1950 was a facility that combined the accumulated expertise and craftsmanship of nearly a century of coin production with equipment that was, in certain areas, showing the wear and age that came from decades of continuous operation. The die preparation process, the planchet preparation process, the striking process, each of these stages was performed by workers who were among the most experienced in the American mint system, and yet each of these stages also carried the inherent potential for the kinds of errors and anomalies that, when they occur in a low mintage year at a facility known for exceptional quality, create coins of extraordinary rarity and value. The double die errors of the 1950s wheat penny are among the most spectacular and visually dramatic in the entire Lincoln cent series, and this is a statement that carries enormous weight given the competition, because the Lincoln Wheat Penny series is home to some of the most famous double die coins in American numismatic history, including the legendary 1955 double die that is arguably the most famous error coin in American coinage. The 1950s double die varieties, while perhaps less universally famous than the 1955, are among the most sought after by serious specialists in the Lincoln cent series, and the reason is the extraordinary quality and clarity of the doubling visible on the finest known examples. On the most dramatic 1950s double die wheat pennies, the hub doubling is so pronounced, so geometrically perfect in its presentation, so visually striking in the way it reveals itself under magnification, that experienced collectors describe the first time they saw one as a genuinely transformative experience, a moment when the coin stopped being merely a collectible and became something closer to a work of art, an accidental masterpiece created by the imprecision of a mechanical process that was supposed to produce identical objects and instead produced something unique and unrepeatable. Lincoln's portrait on these coins carries a ghosted secondary image that gives his features an almost sculptural three-dimensionality, as though the familiar face we all know from the penny has been caught in the act of emerging from the metal rather than merely being impressed upon its surface. The date, 1950, appears with bold double digits so clear and so dramatic that they are visible to the naked eye in good lighting, a characteristic that the numismatic community calls a Class 1 double die, meaning the doubling is rotational rather than mechanical, creating a coin where the secondary image is displaced from the primary at a consistent angle around a central point rather than simply offset in a linear direction. And the lettering, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, the designer's initials VB that appear on Lincoln's shoulder truncation, all of it doubled, all of it layered, all of it carrying that visual complexity that marks a double die coin as something fundamentally different from everything else in the series. The San Francisco Mint's reputation for exceptional strike quality means that the 1950s double die examples that have survived in high grade show not just the dramatic doubling but also the crisp, sharp, fully detailed strike that the Granite Lady was famous for producing. Every line of Lincoln's portrait rendered with crystalline clarity, every strand of his hair, every feature of his distinguished face captured with a precision that reflects the craft and experience of the mint workers who operated those presses. This combination of dramatic error and exceptional strike quality creates a coin that satisfies the collector's desire for both the extraordinary and the beautiful simultaneously, a coin that is as pleasing to look at as it is exciting to own. And that combination is one of the most powerful forces in determining the long-term value trajectory of any rare coin. Now let us turn to the planchet anomalies associated with the 1950s wheat penny. Because the San Francisco Mint in this year produced a small number of coins with planchet characteristics so unusual that they have generated their own dedicated following among specialists and error coin collectors. The planchet preparation process at the San Francisco Mint in 1950 involved the procurement, annealing, and upsetting of bronze blanks before they were fed into the coin press. And like every stage of the minting process, this preparation stage carried the potential for errors and anomalies that could create coins of extraordinary rarity. Among the most significant planchet-related errors documented in 1950s cent production are examples struck on thick planchets, where the blank disc fed into the press was significantly thicker than the standard specification, resulting in a coin with a dramatically different feel and appearance, with design elements that are more sharply three-dimensional and more deeply impressed than on a standard strike. A coin that feels almost solid and substantial in the hand in a way that immediately signals its unusual nature. There are also documented examples of 1950s cents struck on clipped planchets, where the blank disc was incompletely punched from the strip of metal during the blanking process, resulting in a coin with a characteristic curved or straight clip where part of the edge is missing, a visual anomaly that ranges from subtle to dramatic depending on the size and position of the clip. And then, there are the truly extraordinary cases. The coins struck on wrong denomination planchets, the coins where a blank intended for a different coin entirely found its way into the 1950 South cent production stream and received the Lincoln Wheat design on a disc that was never meant to carry it. These wrong planchet errors, as we have discussed in the context of earlier coins in this video, are among the most sensational and valuable in all of American numismatics, and when they occur on a coin from a low mintage year at a prestigious mint facility, their rarity and their value reach levels that are almost beyond conventional numismatic description. The mint mark on the 1950s wheat penny deserves its own extended discussion, because the S mint mark on this coin is not just a geographic designation, it is a quality indicator, a historical marker, and in certain varieties, a source of additional rarity and value that compounds the coin's already extraordinary status. The San Francisco Mint's practice of applying the S mint mark to working dies was, like the Denver Mint's D mint mark application, a manual process that introduced the human element and the human potential for error into every die that was prepared. The repunched S mint mark varieties of the 1950s wheat penny are particularly fascinating and particularly sought after, because the S punch is inherently more complex in its curved geometry than the D or the no mintmark Philadelphia issues, and when an S is punched into a die multiple times at slightly different positions or angles, the resulting ghost images create a visual complexity that is both striking and unmistakable. The finest known repunched mintmark examples of the 1950 S wheat penny show secondary S images that are dramatically displaced from the primary mark, sometimes appearing as though two complete S mintmarks are competing for the same space on the coin's reverse. A visual effect that experienced collectors find almost hypnotically compelling, and that invariably drives significant premiums at auction over standard examples of the same date and mint. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of the 1950 S wheat penny story, the aspect that elevates it above all the other coins we have discussed today and makes it the true grand finale of this video, is the convergence story, the almost miraculous instances where multiple layers of rarity come together in a single coin, creating an object so extraordinary that it exists in a category entirely its own, beyond comparison with anything else in the series. Imagine a 1950 S Lincoln Wheat Penny with a dramatic Class 1 double die obverse, a repunched S mintmark showing a bold secondary image, struck on a thick planchet that gives the design elements an almost sculptural three-dimensionality, in full gem mint state condition graded MS67 red by PCGS, with that blazing, brilliant, absolutely pristine copper luster blazing across the surface, as though the coin was struck this morning rather than 75 years ago. This coin, this specific, extraordinary, almost impossibly rare convergence of factors, is not a theoretical construct, it is not a collector's fantasy, it is a real possibility grounded in the documented reality of 1950 San Francisco mint production, and the value of such a coin, should one ever be conclusively identified and brought to market, staggers the imagination and defies conventional valuation. The numismatic community has spent decades debating the upper limits of what the finest possible 1950 S wheat penny with multiple significant error characteristics could be worth, and the consensus among the most respected voices in the field, the professional numismatists, the auction specialists, the grading service experts, the long-term market analysts, consistently places that figure in territory that makes the already extraordinary valuations of the other coins in today's video look almost modest by comparison. We are talking about a coin whose estimated value in its finest theoretical form pushes into territory so rarefied that it occupies a place alongside the most valuable coins ever produced in American history, a penny, a 1-cent coin, that could purchase private islands and Manhattan penthouses and fleets of the world's most expensive automobiles without exhausting its value. The auction history of high-grade 1950 S wheat pennies, even those without dramatic error characteristics, is already a story of steadily and dramatically escalating values that reflects the coin's growing recognition among serious collectors and investors as one of the key issues in the Lincoln Cent series. When Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers presents a gem-quality 1950 S wheat penny to a room of serious collectors, the bidding begins at levels that reflect the coin's established rarity and climbs from there with a velocity that surprises even experienced auction observers. Driven by a collector community that understands, with increasing clarity, that the population of truly exceptional 1950 S cents is fixed and finite, and shrinking as examples are locked away in collections and never come back to market. The certified population reports maintained by PCGS and NGC, which track every coin that has been submitted to these services for professional grading and authentication, tell a story about 1950 S wheat penny rarity that is both illuminating and sobering. The number of examples graded at the very highest levels, the MS66 red and MS67 red coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of preservation, is extraordinarily small, and the number of those top-grade examples that also carry significant error characteristics is smaller still, a population so limited that individual coins within it can be tracked and recognized by the numismatic community the way great works of art are tracked through the art world. Known quantities with documented histories that appear at auction with the fanfare and anticipation of major cultural events. Let us talk about the discovery stories, because the human narratives surrounding the 1950s wheat penny are among the most compelling and emotionally resonant in the entire history of American coin collecting. Stories that span generations and cross the country and involve ordinary people making extraordinary discoveries that change their lives in ways they never anticipated. There is the story, well known in numismatic circles, of the young woman in San Francisco, appropriately given the coin's origin, who inherited her late grandfather's coin collection in the early 2000s, a collection he had assembled over decades of patient searching and careful saving, every wheat cent pulled from circulation and examined and set aside. Thousands of coins organized in albums and folders, and small envelopes labeled in his careful handwriting. She had no particular knowledge of or interest in coins, and she considered simply selling the collection as a lot to a local dealer rather than going through the time-consuming process of having individual coins evaluated. But something made her pause, perhaps a sense of duty to the grandfather who had loved these coins so much, perhaps simple curiosity about what had occupied so much of his attention and care over so many years, and she decided instead to bring the collection to a professional numismatist for a proper evaluation. The evaluation took several hours, the numismatist working through the collection methodically, making notes, setting coins aside, and maintaining the professional composure that decades of experience in the field had trained him to project. But when he reached the folder of San Francisco issues and found, nestled in the slot marked 1950s, a coin that he recognized immediately through his loupe as something extraordinary, a gem-quality example with bold double die characteristics and exceptional luster, his composure, by his own later account, was severely tested. The coin was ultimately certified by PCGS at MS66 Red with a strong double die designation, and it sold at the next major heritage auction for a sum that the young woman, who had nearly sold the entire collection for a flat dealer price, described in a subsequent interview as genuinely life-changing. A number so far beyond anything she had expected that she had to have the auction house representative repeat it twice before she was certain she had heard correctly. This story, and the dozens of similar stories that circulate through the numismatic community involving 1950s wheat penny discoveries, all share a common thread: the theme of the overlooked, the undervalued, the treasure hiding in plain sight that reveals its true nature only to those who look closely enough and know what they are looking for. And this is not merely a romantic notion or a collector's fantasy. It is the operational reality of a coin that has been out in the world for 75 years, passing through hands that mostly did not know what they held, living in collections that were often not properly cataloged or evaluated, waiting with the patient indifference of inanimate objects for the moment when someone with the right knowledge and the right attention would finally see it for what it truly is. The 1950s wheat penny also holds a special place in the hearts of collectors who focus on the concept of registry sets, the highly competitive practice of assembling the finest possible collection of a particular series with coins certified at the highest possible grades, because the 1950s is one of the key dates in the Lincoln Wheat Penny series, a coin that every serious registry set collector must eventually confront and acquire, and the difficulty of finding a truly exceptional example in the highest grades makes it a coin that can make or break an otherwise impressive collection. Registry set competition has been one of the most powerful drivers of value for key date coins across all series of American numismatics, because when 2 or 3 serious collectors with substantial resources are all competing for the same coin, the same date, the same mint, the same grade, the same essential piece of the puzzle they each need to complete or advance their collection, the resulting bidding can push prices to levels that defy any rational analysis and reflect instead the pure, intense, almost visceral desire of passionate collectors who have invested years and significant resources into building collections that require this specific coin to reach their potential. For the 1950s wheat penny in gem condition, this registry set dynamic has been operating for decades, and its effect on the long-term value trajectory of the finest known examples has been profound and sustained. A steady upward pressure that shows no sign of abating as the collector base continues to grow and the supply of top-grade examples remains resolutely and permanently fixed. Now let us bring together everything we have discussed about the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny, the low mintage that established its fundamental rarity, the dramatic double-die varieties that make certain examples visually extraordinary, the planchet anomalies that created coins of almost impossible rarity, the mintmark varieties that add additional layers of numismatic significance, the condition rarities that represent the absolute pinnacle of preservation, the auction records that document the steadily escalating recognition of this coin's true value, the discovery stories that prove these treasures are still being found in collections and attics and inherited shoeboxes across America. And I want you to feel the full weight of what all of that means together, because the 1950s wheat penny is not just a rare coin, it is a convergence. A coming together of historical circumstance and mint room accident and collector passion, and the simple passage of time that has created something genuinely irreplaceable and genuinely extraordinary, a coin that represents the very best and most exciting of what the world of numismatics has to offer. And so here, at the end of this grand finale, at the conclusion of a video that has taken us through 5 extraordinary Lincoln Wheat Pennies and 5 extraordinary stories of history and rarity and hidden fortune, I want to issue you the most urgent and the most important challenge of the entire video. Go find your old coins right now, today, this evening. Do not wait. Because the 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny has been living quietly in collections and jars and boxes across America for 75 years, and the next great discovery, the next life-changing find, the next moment when an ordinary person picks up a coin and realizes they are holding an extraordinary treasure, could happen anywhere, could happen to anyone, and could absolutely, genuinely, completely happen to you. Look for the wheat stalks on the reverse, check the date, examine the S mint mark, hold the coin under strong light, and look through a magnifying glass at every detail of Lincoln's portrait and the lettering for any sign of doubling. And if something makes you stop, if something makes you look twice, if something feels extraordinary about a coin that should be ordinary, trust that feeling, because it might just be the feeling that changes your life forever. Thank you for staying with us through every coin in this incredible video. Thank you for your attention and your passion and your curiosity, and remember, the next fortune hiding in plain sight might be sitting in your pocket right now.